This whole thing has a very, very
Clean up your
like
room.
glossed over sheen to it, doesn't it? Look at the production value. Look at it. These aren't a whole bunch of white supremacists doing revisionist history to talk about how, you know, Western imperialism is actually a benefit to all of society and that we should all be, you know, celebrating white conquerors more and stuff like that. This is just a bunch of philosophers, historians, and a bunch of people who are simply going to be talking about everyday topics, and it's going to be fun too. We got a lads moment, you know, just hanging out with the boys, fucking weekend with the boys, talking about Black Panther, you know, and how there's some kind of global black white supremacist hero savior complex going on or something. Sargon's return. We covered this dude in so long. It's been wonderful.
Hi folks, it's been a while, hasn't it? How are you doing? I'm doing really well, and we at loadseaters.com are also doing really well. I thought I'd give you an update on what's been happening and how far we've got, just because I haven't used this channel in ages because I've been really, really busy. So for any of you who were around like 2 years ago, no, 3 years ago, God, has it been that long? When I first started this project, you remember that this studio was quite ramshackle, the original studio that we had. Well, in the meantime, we have upgraded it to 2 studios and become a professional, Oh,
I'm not gonna lie, this looks like InfoWars vibes. You've got a massive ass fucking, you know, table, big screens behind you.
oiled machine for producing really interesting content. And so I thought I'd talk to you just about what the
He never got removed. I think they got demonetized. I don't know if they've been remonetized though.
purpose of all of this is, and give you a broad overview of what we've been doing. Because actually, I think a lot of what we're doing is really important and necessary.
Yeah, they were demonetized 5 months ago.
So just a quick overview, of course. Loadseats.com is my website, and we produce loads of great content. We've got regular weekly shows such as Contemplations, Epochs, Symposium, Brokenomics, and we started a new show called The Lads Hour, which is a lot less scripted than the other ones, but a lot.
That looks like fucking 2 hours of listening to how, you know, women's spaces are being destroyed. We're the real feminists, and also the Jews are a problem that we need to talk about, but no one has the courage.
More fun. And we have various periodic shows such as book clubs, Our Cyberpunk Dystopia, particular trying to not just preserve, but also create, to change the direction and the flow of where things are going. Because I think if there's one thing we can all agree on at this point, is that nobody's really happy with the direction in which our civilizations are traveling. And yet no one seems to have any real idea of what we're supposed to do about it. What we are supposed to do is the great work that we're undertaking at loadseaters.com. So I thought I'd give you a brief tour. So we'll begin our tour with understanding the left and liberalism, because liberalism is something that emotionally I still like and still think is the right thing to do. But there is no denying that philosophically there are problems with liberalism, and it is in exploiting these problems that the left has managed to gain such ground. And the work we've done on this is extensive and voluminous and totally worth your time. For example, I did a big study on critical race theory in 2021, 2022. I did lots and lots of videos of this that are on the website, just a general overview or an in-depth explanation, and drilling right down into what the purpose of critical race theory is. Because the purpose isn't merely social justice, obviously. The purpose is, of course,
anti-white racism,
to instantiate communism. And this dovetails with the extensive work on liberalism because it is through the weaknesses, the philosophical and ideological weaknesses of liberalism, that critical race theory has gestated, developed, and finally burst out and conquered. This is why we're in this position, because liberalism can't mount a defense against critical race theory, because critical race theory comes from within liberalism. This is something that I've explained at length on the site, and honestly, I think it's totally worth your time to understand why this is the case, because it isn't that liberalism is evil. The problem with liberalism is that it is misguided, that it begins with false premises and then continues onto a conclusion that really is kind of undesirable, and actually you don't want to live in a purely liberal world. And
so, if I get this right, liberalism is the gateway to communism through CRT. That's the lesson here. So that's why so many people fought so hard to get CRT in schools, elementary schools, high schools. They weren't successful, unfortunately. That battle was won, thankfully, thanks to the Republicans. They effectively eliminated a problem that never existed in the first place. But they stopped communism in the process, which is good.
Is the weakness of the purely liberal world that the critical race theorists are now weaponizing against the well-meaning and almost kind of naive liberals who think, well, can't we all just have a world where we have a certain set of enunciated rights and then be left alone to live our lives? And that would be lovely, wouldn't it? And that sounds great.
Does sound great. Unfortunately, if you are racialized in society, you might experience different encounters with the criminal justice system, and that every single one of us who pays our taxes is directly contributing to that system. So just to ignore it and pretend like it's not even a thing is kind of the problem. That's the essence of it all. Yes, and I'm sure everyone would like to just be left alone altogether, right? Same thing that applies to people who like doing drugs. You know, it turns out white people, black people, they use comparable same amounts of drug use, but turns out black people have way more encounters with the police, have way higher sentences, they can't afford, bail, all that kind of shit. Like that all plays a very large role into it. So to simply say like, well, why can't we just, leave each other alone and understand why we need to keep talking about all these terrible things, race, they're trying to divide us. They want to divide us, they do.
In theory, except when you start digging down further into it, you realize that actually this is a vulnerable structure that is just waiting for someone with ill intent to come along and attack it. And that's what wokeness is. The next thing we work on is understanding ourselves, because this is something that actually you really need to do. You need to have a kind of self-awareness. And this is where some of the other presenters really come into their own. Josh, for example, has a master's degree in psychology and runs the Contemplation series. One of the latest ones he's done, which I've personally really enjoyed, is on cults. Now, I'm sure you can remember, about 5 or 6 years ago, I read a couple of books on cults and did some videos on them. Well, Josh actually has a lot more training in this than I do, in understanding what a cult is and the human psychology behind it. And so he's gone into great depth on this. And this is genuinely valuable stuff, how you can know you're not falling into a political cult. And parallel to this, we have Stelios's Symposium. Now, Stelios was a professor of philosophy at the University of York, and for some reason he wanted to come and work for me. I was like, okay, sold. And so Stelios' Symposium is a philosophy series where we just explore.
Hoping just an ad.
And the entire thing really is captured in the framing. This is why it's important for us to be able to understand and reframe things in the way that suits us. I personally have been doing a lot of philosophical work myself. I've been studying extensively the concepts of aesthetics and language, because I think that there is a lot contained in there that we don't realize is being stripped away by the kind of clinical modern language. The most popular podcast I've done on the website was actually called Thick Concepts, in which I explain what the depth of certain areas of our language really means, why we should use judgmental, moralizing language when we feel it's appropriate, and why we should resist the kind of...
Isn't it wild that, of course, it's AAVE, like, of course, naturally. Yeah, a whole bunch of white supremacists, basically reappropriating terms and language that was started by black people.
Thinning out of language into sterile, non-human concepts. You know the difference between mother and father. And
like the irony of that entire thing is completely lost on all of them. Right here, he's like, oh yes, we should have a course on language and how language changes and is manipulated and taken, appropriated, if you will, from different cultures and societies. And so that's why we started this. Thick concepts. Yes, thick spelled this way, specifically.
Parent or birth giver, things like that. Very.
Yeah, and naturally, trans people. I mean, 7 minutes. That took longer than expected. I'll give them that.
Insistent on this, that actually the depth of human language is there for us to use, and we should use it, and resist the left's attempts to thin it out and remove concepts that otherwise genuinely inform aspects of our lives that we would otherwise be unable to see. From these positions, we can go on to understanding the modern world around us, modernity. And this, I think, is really important because actually, if you look at, say, the news or a lot of online commentary, you realize that not much of it is actually very useful for understanding what is going on beneath the hood, so to speak. So on the website, we have many great series.
The whole thing is an ad. I basically want a proclamation here, though. I want a...
Comprehension. Well, unfortunately, they're well within our comprehension at this point. Probably the most important thing that we're doing on the website at the moment, though. And I really think this is the crux of everything that this has been building to.
His Wikipedia is pretty spot on. I haven't checked his Wikipedia. Carl Benjamin, also known by his online pseudonym Sargon of Akkad, is a British right-wing anti-feminist YouTuber and political commentator. A former member of the Eurosceptic right-wing UK Independence Party, or UKIP, he was one of the unsuccessful candidates for the South West England constituency in 2019 European Parliament election in the United Kingdom. During the Gamergate harassment campaign, Benjamin promoted the conspiracy theory that feminists were infiltrating video game research groups to influence game development. Since Gamergate, he has focused on promoting Brexit and criticizing feminism, Islam, identity politics, and what he views as political correctness in the media and other institutions. Benjamin has been described describe as politically right-wing and far-right by multiple outlets. He denies this description of his politics, instead calling himself a classical liberal and a skeptic. In 2016, his response to journalist Jess Phillips' complaints that she frequently received rape threats from men online, Benjamin tweeted to her, "I wouldn't even rape you." Criticism of this comment and a later remark in which Benjamin said that he might rape Phillips, but for the fact that nobody's got that much beer, dominated press coverage of his European Parliament candidacy. Yeah, I remember that. It kept on surfacing, and then he kept on being like, what, this is all about, freedom of speech, the ability to make a joke. Look what happened to Count Dankula when he did the whole Nazi, trained his dog to do the Nazi salute, and they came after him.
What is the alternative? Because it seems inevitable that we end up in a kind of rationalistic, liberal/progressive form of politics that just continues to slide to the left. It seems that there is just no alternative. But actually, there are alternatives. Actually, there are other ways of looking at politics. You just have to understand what it is you're being presented with and understand the paradigm in which you swim. This is one of the things that British...
By the way, make no mistake, white supremacy, especially like different forms of it, are going to come in very, very, let's just say, masked and polished varieties. This is a very good example of that. You're going to get something that on the surface, he's completely rebranded himself. He's not Sargon of Akkad. He's not anti-Gamergate, anti-SJW, fuck the feminist Sargon of Akkad. No, this is the Lotus Eaters, and it's a network of information in which we talk about a lot of different topics, philosophy, history, stuff like that. And we really seek to inform, to be able to explain today the modern paradigm and why everyone feels so very confused, and that's what we're going to bring you. We really hope you'll support us along the way.
Philosopher Michael Oakeshott really managed to highlight and make very clear, illuminate in his work Rationalism in Politics. There really are solid alternatives to the way things are done at the moment. You'll notice that almost everything is purely ideological. We have a pre-scripted plan on what should be done. The problem is that reality is in the way. Well, there is an alternative, and that is what I suppose Oakeshott would just call traditional politics or traditionalist politics, which is to look at who we are, where we are, and the circumstances around us, to view this as a benefit rather than a detriment, to look at the things we want in conjunction with where we have come from and where we would desire to actually be, rather than take some kind of almost...
It's so vague, so unbelievably vague. Like, if you were a first-time viewer of this, you just came across this channel and you were listening to him, you probably wouldn't know anything about this dude's history. It's like, oh, is this the guy who just kept talking about how he wouldn't rape some MP? It's like, no. This is actually, like, he's a philosopher. He's an auteur. He's actually heavily studied, and there's a lot of people who are now working with him, very accredited people, people with masters in psychiatry and psychology and stuff like that. They're partnering with him to teach. They're just talking about philosophy, issues, history, stuff like that. Learn.
Really can't help but understand my personal frame.
Edgy Nazi didn't work very well. No, I mean, like, a really big example of an attempt at rebranding the entire fascist movement was the alt-right and Richard Spencer. But unfortunately, Richard Spencer, at the end of the day, a Nazi's a Nazi, right? They can't help themselves. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, hey, wait, this is a bunch of you doing this whole blood and soil stuff. This is really anti-Semitic and scary. You guys are just exactly like Nazis. Yep. Yeah, it turns out the alt-right, that's what they were all along, but they did want to brand themselves that way, an alternative to the right wing, a new kind of right wing.
In politics now, through the lens of sort of Edmund Burke's traditional eternal society, the great chain of being that stretches back into the distant past, that you want to stretch into the future, and that only works if you do your part as the current contemporary link in the chain that you are. And after 3 years of studying this and coming to a bunch of epiphanies on it, it's been really great to be able to go to conferences and present all of these ideas and speak to people in real life about them. And we've recorded all of this and put this on the website as well.
Oh, the AI
so if you want to see the sort of things we're talking about with other like-minded people, you absolutely can. And finally, I realize this all sounds rather intense and highbrow, and I want to be clear.
No, it sounds unbelievably vague. Fucking spit it out.
We actually have a lot of fun content on the website as well.
Oh, fun.
I mean, I've got lots of deep dives into pop culture there, sort of the the politics of
the Black Panther with Harry and Connor. I can't wait. I cannot wait. Yes, riveting stuff.
Videos.
What's the bottom thing say there? Black Lives Matter, globalist conspiracy. Yeah, there it is. Globalist hero fantasy. My apology.
The various the politics of videos. And I have one coming about the Barbie movie very soon. And I have to say, my take on this is very novel. You are not going to get a take like this anywhere else. Like I said, we start the Lads Hour, which is just a lot of fun, just unscripted, relaxed, talking about just whatever's the main thing that's on everyone's mind this week, basically. That's on a Thursday afternoon. And for those asking for a return of This Week in Stupid, and even to this day, I get people asking me, well, can you bring back This Week in Stupid? Well, that's kind of what the daily podcast is, actually. It's basically...
Okay, so basically they are very heavily funded, very well maintained, and this is a massive network that is going to be coming out of Britain that is going to be spouting hate, but brandishing the entire thing as intellectual. This whole thing has a very, very
Clean up your
like
room.
glossed over sheen to it, doesn't it? Look at the production value. Look at it. These aren't a whole bunch of white supremacists doing revisionist history to talk about how, Western imperialism is actually a benefit to all of society and that we should all be, celebrating white conquerors more and stuff like that. This is just a bunch of philosophers, historians, and a bunch of people who are simply going to be talking about everyday topics. And it's going to be fun, too. We got a lads moment, just hanging out with the boys. Fucking weekend with the boys, talking about Black Panther, and how there's some kind of global black white supremacist hero savior complex going on or something.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. This show is produced by amazing people like you, and if you want to help us out, please consider donating over at patreon.com/theserfs. The show is made possible thanks to Amazing Fletch, Anna Loves Riley, Ariane McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Lamidia Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Omni, Peanut Butter Blondie, Political Pappy, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Ruby K, Sir Nickus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Demo, Tech Tink, Trevbot EXE, Words Greenwood, and not to mention all of the amazing and fabulous people you now see before you.